All right, let's get started.
All right, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Chris Haggerty. I'm National Sales Manager for Fusion5's Enterprise Services pillar. I'm joined by Edward Zazor, who's the CTO of our Enterprise Services pillar as well. So just to quickly run through today's agenda. So thanks so much for joining us. The agenda today, I'll do a 15-minute introduction, a big welcome to all the Fusion5 customers who have joined us on the webinar, and for those who are just learning about Fusion5, who are being introduced to us perhaps this morning through this webinar, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to do a pretty high-level brief introduction to Fusion5, a little bit about our business and how it all fits together and makes sense. I'll then pass it over on to Ed, who's going to go through the whole IT asset management story, why it's important to businesses like yours, and how we can help you gain control of your assets and what that means to your business. So a little bit about Fusion5. We've been around for a little while now. We've been around for nearly 16 years, a New Zealand headquartered company. We've grown to over 400 employees with offices across New Zealand and Australia, 9 offices in fact, and close to 900 customers. So as an organisation, we specialise in core business applications, innovation and enterprise services. From an applications perspective, you can see from an applications perspective, yes, you can see from this slide, we partner with tier 1 applications providers globally to try and support your business initiatives going forward. So you can recognize a lot of the names here on this slide. There are also a couple of names which may be new to you. Gemini, for example, is our own Fusion5 developed employee-centric HR platform. We also have a couple of other solutions there which are driven by Fusion5, but we do partner with these tier 1 providers to drive value through your business. We're also a big innovator. We've got a dedicated innovations team that we're really proud of. What these guys do is they work with some of the new technologies that are being driven through the marketplace, mobility, Internet of Things, cognitive services. And what the innovation team does is work with our customers to differentiate them in the marketplace and add value to the solutions that they're providing their customers in a way that other vendors can't do. So we're very, very proud of what innovation can do. A lot of interest in the marketplace around integration as a service, which is what we do very well as also driven by our innovations team. And Fusion5 itself is a significant managed service provider. We host payroll services, for example, for over 200 customers. So the purpose of this slide is that irrespective of what architecture you have, if you have a cloud or a hybrid architecture or a mixture of both, if you're looking to offboard potentially legacy applications that you may have on premise, we can put those in the Fusion5 cloud for you. If you're having Office 365 migrations, we can talk to you about that. The point here is that Fusion5 has skills really across the board from an ICT perspective, and we'd love to have a chat with you about what you're doing with your business in a broader sense. Okay. So I'm going to hand over to Ed, who's going to talk about IT asset management in the context of what unified IT is. It's a broader initiative from Ivanti, which Fusion5 has bought into, not only as a partner of Ivanti, but as a customer of Ivanti. Fusion5 has embarked on the unified IT strategy. So we do drink our own champagne, and we can talk about this topic with a lot of credibility and knowledge in the marketplace. So thanks, Ed. I'll take it from there.
Thanks, Chris. So today's webinar is about finding your lost socks, which is all about asset management, but it's very important, and we'd like to leave you with this, if you haven't heard of it before. It all has to be part of a bigger strategy, and a lot of the applications that Chris showed that we specialize in, they're all going through their own digital transformation. And surprise, surprise, IT is doing the same. And Ivanti's strategy in this space and offerings are really aligned to help organizations address the existing problem. And if you're not from an IT background, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes to really emphasize why sometimes they're slow to respond. End users or even external customers have a low user satisfaction rate, and why every now and again there's a comm about a P1 or a breach or risk, generally speaking. So traditionally, IT is running around, and all the other teams associated with IT around security, governance, and things like that. They're juggling a lot of responsibilities, and a lot of those capabilities are actually delivered through point solutions that are completely isolated from each other. So if you can imagine, if they're running around trying to manage all this, it's very hard to be strategic. So that's the problem that unified IT addresses. And Ivanti is unique in the sense that all pillars of IT are provided by a single vendor, and we're not only a platinum partner of Ivanti's, we're actually one of their largest customers here in Australia, because we've gone with a full adoption of this strategy. As Chris mentioned, it's very important as an implementer to make sure that we have ample experience in rolling this out. But today, as you can see there in the middle of the screen, we're really focusing on asset management and finding what you have. And it's the very first step of a journey within your maturity and attainment model of a real-time, low-risk asset management approach. So what happens when socks go missing, right? And these, Chris and I spend a lot of time talking to customers, period. But when the topic is around asset management, we find that asset management is actually more important than people think. There's actually 6 corporate KPIs that asset management influences. And there, I'm going to spend a bit of time taking you through that now. Regardless of role, asset availability and performance is the #1 thing. So I'll talk about that in a second. At the end of the day, your organization, regardless of industry, provide company-issued assets in all shapes and sizes to their employees to generate business, right? Not being able to understand where the assets are or how they're performing is a high risk. The second thing is cost of ownership, and I'll talk about that. So just everything has to be associated to dollar signs. And again, historically, this takes a mammoth effort at audit time, budgeting, things like that. It's harder than it needs to be. And look, at the end of the day, with everything you're going to see on the webinar today, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So we'll talk a bit about that. Also, in this current climate of security and cybersecurity, the assets are a very attractive entry point for hackers, right? So not only from a compliance auditing, like software vendors coming, hardware vendors checking what you've contractually purchased, that's a given, but it's about the risk of securing those, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And user experience is common across no matter what solution you put in. So again, it could be the best tool out there or best solution out there, but if users can't use it, it's a problem. Point #5, now when you start talking to C-level and management, their budgets are not increasing, their headcount's not increasing. They really need to be able to scale with what they have. And asset management comes into that, because if you have legacy assets or assets that don't allow you to do more with less, or worse, that they outright introduce vulnerabilities, then it's something that you need to look at, and we can help with that. And last but not least, fiscal accountability at a corporate level. How do you defend budgets? How do you prove your worth? How do you ask for extra headcount? And asset management is a big part of that, because It's broader than just hardware and software. You know, some organizations consider, you know, humans assets. They, you know, you can go down to the level of, if you're a managed service provider, all the moving pieces in the cloud, even if you're not solely responsible for those and it's outsourced, you still need to have visibility of that to avoid surprises. So let's spend a little bit of time, you know, diving a little bit deeper into each one of these. So the most common questions are what you see on the screen. And a little soundbite for you. I mean, how we help customers at Fusion5, we don't like big, long projects. We select technology that provides quick wins, that is robust and nimble. And we do a lot of pilots in the asset management space to address that first question. You know, when we start talking to customers, they're like, well, we actually don't know what we have. So our response to that is, okay, well, let us spend a day on site and put something in to start collecting that information. And we go back in a week and do some presentations and things like that. And the last proof of concept that we've done, the customer turned around and said, well, you've discovered 28% more assets than our current tool. And that's very powerful. That's something that's measurable, and it's actually not that hard to do. Also, assignments. So I'll mention onboarding a few times during the webinar today, but most companies are good enough onboarding. What I mean by that, having all the assets ready for the employees within, you know, the first 48 hours of their starting or changing a role. But what they're not so good at is when people leave, recouping or reclaiming those assets. You know, forget the financial angle. It's also a security threat, right? So asset management and knowing where it is at all points in time, both within its own life cycle and your life cycle, is huge, and it's a critical part that we look at when we embark on a journey with you. The other thing is having visibility of, is that asset actually meeting the needs of the user that is assigned to it? And the only way you can track that is if you have a 360-degree view of the incidents, problems, changes throughout the life cycle of those assets, right? And some customers outright say, you know what, I'd be guessing, I really have no clue. And the CFO is always asking questions, and it takes us weeks to compile data for them. Again, in this day and age and digitization, that's just no longer acceptable, right? So it's a big part of what we do straight up is allow customers to gain, you know, visibility they've never had before. Cost of ownership. Okay, I've got a bunch of contracts in our corporate repository, in my SharePoint. You know, we revisit them every year, but I don't actually know what it's really costing me. I know what I'm paying the vendor, but I don't know how much we log tickets. I don't know how much lost productivity there is when some of these things fail. We just do true ups when license renewals come up just to be safe and avoid penalties. And again, that's a lot of lost revenue, lost a lot of things, right? And there's a graphic there that just shows you the end game here with software, gaining visibility and insights to your landscape and where the software is installed and how it's being utilized. And this is real time. This is not coming from a data warehouse or anything like that. So that's one of the very first things you look at as well. It's very hard to track whether or not somebody needed a piece of software at a point in time and it's still installed and it's been 6 months and we should really reclaim that license. From a cost of ownership, being able to plug leakage in this space is huge.
That's a great point, Ed. In fact, recent reports from Gartner say as much as 78% of annual IT budgets are being spent on BAU or keeping the lights on. So when we look at the technical debt that organisations are holding, having real-time, accurate asset management and software asset management information at your fingertips can really help organisations start to reclaim some of that lost capital and technical debt. So it's so important.
Thank you. Spot on. And I don't know if any of the people on the call have any security responsibilities, but if you're in Australia, the ASD, top 4 essential aid, and if you're in New Zealand, the CERT NZ, top 10 recommendations. I mean, asset management's like, all over that as well. If you look at the fine print in the ASD, basically, it says we are assuming that you have your asset management under control before you try these, recommendations. And at the end of the day, what that really means is somebody in your organization is losing sleep over over something. Concerns about regulations, concerns about, are those assets secure and safe? So yeah, from a compliance and risk management, not a lot of customers, when we have this chat, they go, oh, hang on, I can see why ITAM is important. It's not just about software audits and license audits. It's also about, security. So we spend a lot of time in that space, and actually Ivanti is very strong in that space. But again, for today's webinar, we're talking about finding your lost socks. The next webinar will discuss security and link the two together, ITAM and security for you. End user experience is also quite important. So the comment I made earlier about shadow IT or your end users, if they try and reach out to IT and can't get what they need, they find other avenues, which introduces a whole bunch of risk that I'm not even going to go into. But any asset management capability really needs to be tightly integrated with whatever your risk management strategy or platform is. And that's what we offer here as well. iTool is one thing, but ITAM, which is an equivalent of iTool, but in the IT asset management space, those processes exist for a reason, and I'll talk about that in a second. But a big emphasis on self-service, even with asset management, being able, when you go in to ask for something, you can see the assets assigned to you. And if they're wrong, you can close that loop and say, you know what, I actually don't have that asset, or hey, I also have, this asset and it's not on the list, and it opens another dialogue with your IT department, and it all goes towards providing you with a better level of service. Talking about scaling the business as well, I've alluded to that, and automation is a big part of this. What I mean by that is, from the point of myself asking for, say, Visio to be installed on my laptop, it really needs to be very responsive and quick. All the manual steps in the middle that affect my customer satisfaction or my satisfaction with the services provided to me can actually be addressed. And this is where, if you've heard of the concept of zero touch, that's where that comes in. Being able to select something or ask for something, goes through an approval, licenses are checked automatically, and then it's delivered to my laptop without me talking to anyone, right? And vice versa. If it hasn't been used for a while, it can actually, get uninstalled and the license be recouped. Being able to scale the business instead of using, valuable ICT resources doing the same mundane things all the time around asset management. And last but not least, before we actually jump into the solution, is the physical accountability. For decades now, IT or technology has been, generally speaking, considered being a black hole from an organizational point of view. It's about, a budget. There's money that gets spent, and it just goes into a black hole. And how the market's shifting now is actually flip that on its head and say, you know what, we can justify, that expenditure. We can show you how much your requests coming from the business are how expensive they are to deliver and maintain, and then you can have meaningful discussions without that ever becoming a negative conversation. And that's, again, from a trend or a market perspective, where the digitization of IT is really going to come to. Chargeback is something that everybody flirts with that I've spoken to, but it's really hard to do if you don't have a good gauge on your asset management. So, sorry, Chris, were you going to say something?
No, keep going.
Okay. No problems. So how do we do all this? So Fusion5 has come up with a unified IT framework, which I'm not going to spend too much time on going into, but from a unified IT end to end, that's what you see on your screen. Today, we're really just talking about asset management and how to get started in that space. And it's no coincidence, just to support what we've been saying during this webinar, asset management is really important to pretty much everything you do, and that there is a good reason why it's one of the first things we tackle for our customers. And as a matter of fact, we do that hand in hand with service management, because it is very important to have asset-centric incident, problem, and change to really increase your maturity in this space. But if we dive down even deeper into that first phase, we've even broken it down further for our customers. And this is what the journey would look like. Phase one is all about the provider and consumer framework, which I'll talk about. But it's about giving you that intelligence you never had, a repeatable, continuous discovery, a aggregation of all the inventory data sources you have, so you can make sense of it before you send it to a single source of truth, which is by best practice supposed to be your configuration management database in your service management platform. And also look at different various integrations around service automation that I mentioned earlier. That's one of the first things we do. And again, today's webinar is only purely going to focus on discovery and the rewards to be recognized by rolling out discovery. And then, of course, phase 2, 3, and 4. The hardware asset management is actually a lot easier than software asset management. So that's the very first thing we look at after getting your discovery under control. We would look at end-to-end lifecycle management of that hardware, vendor management, contract management, all becoming available in a single platform so you can make informed decisions. We then apply the same concept to software. Now, software is harder, just historically speaking, and it's only going to get harder as everybody goes to the cloud, because there's a lot of moving pieces in the cloud. Vendors are continuously changing how they license things, and you need a hand. Most organizations need a hand with that. Ivanti have a full-time group of librarians, they're called. They're continuously monitoring the market more specifically monitoring the big vendors and all the different caveats and clauses they put on their contracts, and then updating the software so you don't have to guess, right? And then the cherry on top, if you will, or the nirvana everyone's heading towards, and now it's becoming a reality, is optimization. What we mean by that is taking it one step further and giving your CFOs or your procurement managers that, perfect tool where they can go and do what if modeling. What I mean by that is, okay, for SAP, IBM, Microsoft, and all the big vendors that have very complex licensing models, what if I convert 25% of my Oracle databases to SQL Server? On the fly, it does its calculations and actually shows you a projection of the cost savings, right? That level of will really reduce your audits. It will help your CIO sleep at night when there's an audit, and that's part of our journey with asset management. And I mentioned IAM before, and just to summarize the slide before in a graphical sense, if you will, a lot of customers, when we do whiteboards and things like that, they really want a visual representation of what it all looks like when it's hanging together, right? So what we're talking about is a single reporting layer that sits across everything, service management, hardware assets, and software assets. And the automation I talked about, being able to automate the most frequent or popular use cases that you have: onboarding, offboarding, software provisioning, isolating assets when a security incident occurs, calculating contracts, things like that. But like Chris mentioned, a lot of things it doesn't matter what industry you're in, Internet of Things is something that will make its way into whatever it is that you do. We've got customers in manufacturing, we've got customers in health. The example is that some hospitals are toying with the idea of putting sensors on wheelchairs that cut off or send an alert when somebody goes past past the car park door, so they don't lose their assets. We've got customers that have multi-million-dollar medical equipment, and there's sensors all over that. And Ivanti is also heading in that space because what they're offering is a unified endpoint management solution. And if you think back to the graphic I was showing about the boxes and juggling those boxes, whatever device flavor that you have comes with its own tool, and it's no longer effective or efficient to have multiple tools to support multiple devices. And what Ivanti offers is a unified tool that helps you manage devices regardless of what they are. Windows, Linux, Solaris, Android, you name it, it's all converging into a unified strategy. And if you can imagine, the reporting on that becomes easier, the governance on that becomes easier. So that's just a graphical representation of the end game. And again, just a couple more minutes before I show you a quick demo. What we're really talking about today is we understand, and Gartner says something like 60% of organizations have a dozen or more, they call them discovery tools, but they could be spreadsheets, if you will, but they're a resemblance of multiple locations where asset data is held. So the first thing we do and help customers find their lost socks is actually say, okay, well, let's create a single repository regardless of where the data comes from. We also deploy our own discovery tool to validate things, but essentially let's connect all your sources into one place so we can make sense of it and create a golden copy of the asset before we do anything. From that point forward, we then integrate or review processes with you on okay, life cycle. From the point of an asset being requested through to a user receiving it, what's that look like? And how does it interact with that reporting? Then we look at the life cycle from being able to track it from being moved from one person to the other, from one geo to the other, from one purpose to the other, and all the way through to disposal. None of the customers I talk to now actually have a fully documented disposal method. They invoke a third party, and sometimes they just put a post-it note with a reference number. If that hard drive shows up or is on the news or whatever, it introduces unnecessary risk to the organization. And then that's really what we're talking about here, having end-to-end tracking of the assets. Then looking at the financial aspects, being able to correlate all those data sources, all the discovery into financial metrics, being able to correlate that with contracts that you have with the vendor, vendor scorecards, allocations, and budgeting. Being able to actually produce a shopping cart experience back at the beginning of the process, where if somebody's asking for something through your service catalog or self-service, they actually know what cost is involved, right? So you can really start doing some chargebacks, or at least educate your business users on, if I choose a certain combination or bundle of assets, how much it actually costs, and they need to be able to be fine with that or approve it. And of course, we're talking now massive projects with assets, being able to do Windows 10 refreshes, office moves, running the whole thing as a project, and again, looking at the dollars and cents. That's the journey a lot of our customers are on different stages of. And I guess the key takeaway here is, if you look back at your own organization and be honest with yourself and see how you are with all these processes, that's really what we're trying to achieve with today's webinar, is a starting point, a logical starting point on how we can help you make IT asset management not such a burden anymore. All right, so this is what it's about. Today was about finding things, verifying what you have. So the word discovery is not new. There's been a lot of discovery tools over the years, but a lot of people have different views of discovery. So I just wanted to share with you what we mean when we say discovery. Discovery in itself, yes, it's a technology that goes out and across your networks and tries to find stuff. But the thing that people sort of forget about is, why are you doing that, right? So there's two purposes. It's not just one to answer what I have. The other thing is to actually validate what I think I have. And I'm going to pause there for a second. It's very important to think about that, because discovery is not just an initial thing you need at the beginning. It's actually a cornerstone of the whole IT asset management discipline, because as you increase your maturity in IT asset management, you need to continuously refer back and say, okay, be able in a single screen, for example, if you're trying to visualize, have three columns. One column is what your contract says that you're entitled to. The other column is, any extra, business-centric attributes you want to associate to that asset from a reporting perspective. But the third and final and most important thing is a real-time, accurate, recent scan of that asset, so you can compare everything. You can see that when you purchase this piece of hardware, it had 4 gigs of RAM, and the last scan we did, it had 2. What went wrong, right? So discovery is an ongoing thing, and that's really the topic of today, is to show you how at Fusion5 we've utilized discovery to give us insights, real-time insights we haven't had before. And this is just the beginning, because we're now feeding that information. We're in the process of reconciling it and making sure that what we've discovered either makes sense or requires further action. But in a nutshell, that's what we mean by establishing a provider and consumer model. We grab all the data sources, we reconcile them, and we make them available to users in different interfaces, be it the service desk, if it's a financial or procurement person, through an optimizer interface, and just have that continuous cycle going. And what we're able to do straight away by doing discovery is what you see in blue. In the space of a week, we were able to answer all those questions. What we actually have, what is its current status, where it is, who's got it, and yeah, we run daily scans. And the point here is, it doesn't matter how many assets your organization has. This solution is agnostic to that. It scales, whether you have a few hundred, a few thousand, or tens of thousands of assets. That this works for all scenarios. The things you see in orange there are things we would look at after we do the discovery, as we embark. It's very hard to answer those questions just by purely discovering what you have. How is that asset performing? What is it costing you? You need a bit of historical data there. And what I mean by that, as soon as the assets are discovered and populated into a single source of truth, as your end users report issues with it, raise incidents, you guys patch it. If you're in IT, you make configuration changes. Over time, you'll be able to drill down into that one asset and look at the full history of events. If you link it up with your monitoring tools, you'll see a full history of requests, incidents. Only then would you be able to actually answer how much it's costing you from procurement through to end of life, right? Okay. Hey, by the way, as we go, I forgot to mention this from a housekeeping perspective. There's a chat capability. If you have any questions at all, please do just post them in there. All right, I'm just switching screens, so just bear with me.
Just as Ed's doing that, I'll share a little anecdote with you. Ed and I were out speaking with a CIO last week, and we were talking about some of his initiatives moving forward into the second part of 2019 and going into 2020. And we had a discussion about artificial intelligence. And as we all know, artificial intelligence relies on machine learning. So if you're unsure of whether or not all of your assets are either discovered, somewhat managed, or partially managed, we quickly pointed out to this gentleman that without an effective discovery and asset management solution, the quality of the learning capabilities of any AI platform is in question. So, as Ed said, discovery is so critical to a whole range of initiatives that exist in all enterprises, whether that be security, other business processes such as automation, or fiscal accountability.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. So what you're looking at is a executive dashboard. So really today in the webinar, what I wanted to point out is what we discovered. So this figure here, which is all devices we all the subnets we put in as a part of the target for the discovery tool to go through and do its thing. We were very quickly able to determine, how many devices it found, right? And then our process was to then deploy agents to laptops first, and then servers second, and we're in the process of rolling it out to mobile phones as well. So as you can imagine, it becomes quite easy having this interface without logging on to a technical tool or asking IT to provide me a report. I have now this information at my fingertips. We're also looking at some of the geolocation and tracking capabilities, and I can very quickly drill down into where a laptop last reported in, which was also another thing. My manager asked me, he goes, can you do that? Which was pretty handy. So what you're looking at here is a business value dashboard, just giving me a good cross section of everything, right? As Chris mentioned, we're a 400 employee company. So you can see here in the process, we've actually uncovered some SOE issues, right? So which brings me to the breakdown of some of the other KPIs. So let me share with you. We've identified that only 268 of our machines are on Windows 10. So we immediately launched an initiative to basically migrate any non-Windows machines and start standardizing our operating environment. You can see here the breakdown. I've also configured the system to monitor certain software. So it actually goes ahead and these are the only vendors I'm interested in. I can actually see which machines that software is installed on, which is pretty powerful. Laptop warranty as well. So we're able to have a look at upcoming warranty. As you can see here, we're a HP shop, and our warranty levels are pretty good. But it actually gives us, from speaking of cost allocation and budgeting and things like that. I've got a projection here that in the next few months, some of our warranties are expiring. I can quickly get a breakdown of the operating environments that we have, and you can see here we've got a good cross section. And again, this is very valuable information for our ICT and our managed services to be able to go, and there's the word validate. Yeah, so discovery is ongoing. This is all real time. Every time scans occur and things like that, all these metrics are getting populated for us to make informed decisions. It even picks up, printers. It picks up, all different types of assets. I can see here we've got 14 printers. It's even able to interrogate to get, printer tones. It keeps a historical record of, how many pages got printed. And then when you roll out an agent, which is the next phase after discovery, without actually doing much, we can look at vulnerabilities around patching. So just looking at those handful of dashboards, I hope you can see that the value or the quick wins of starting to get a full visibility of your fleet, of your assets, or more importantly and realistically, identifying why some assets are not even showing up and starting that process is huge. So this interface you're looking at provides a real-time business value metrics around your asset fleet. And of course, I'm not going to go into every little thing this tool can do, but you can see here the groupings, which are important. Security, so you can look at security aspects, the patching aspects, data analytics, which I'll show you in a second. The ability to go out to vendor websites and grab information like serial numbers, warranty. That's how the laptop warranty was working. This is the end point here, is being able to get that information in a nice little interface. The other useful interface I wanted to share with you is asset-centric. I mentioned that a few times now, but this is just an example of the self-service capability. So one of the main things that we try to achieve, and I'll show you that in a second, is allowing your ICT or if you're a managed service provider, being able to establish a product catalog. So a lot of our customers, probably 90% of them, on their self-service portal, they've got some generic forms where a user can go in and request pretty much whatever they want, and they're not governed. So a big part of the IT asset management strategy is to allow you to only allow users to request approved hardware, right? And the way to do that is through asset management, is being able to go through and publish what your users are actually allowed to request from you. It sounds very basic, but not a lot of customers are actually doing that. So when I come in here, first of all, I can see my assets, but let's say I want to request a new piece of hardware or something from ICT. I can go in and I can say, okay, I'd like to request either a laptop and server, whatever it is. And when you choose that, it will only ever show you the specifications that ICT supports. And this is just an example. Surface Pro, there will be a couple of options. But back to the accountability and allocation, you can see here immediately one of the key things is starting to make the cost visible to the user or to the requester, right? And from an asset management perspective, once the life cycle starts, there's different things that will happen along the journey, all rolling up to the user actually getting the asset. So from an end user perspective, it's very important to have something fully integrated into your service catalog and have them just disjointed. These templates are just standalone and they don't actually look at the asset repository, right? One of the other things I'll also show you is, just bear with me. If there are any technical people in the audience, I have no problem. I'm technically minded. Now, business users won't see this, so this is just for the benefit of the technical users on the call. This is the unified endpoint management solution that I was talking about. It's being able to, I'm going to show you just a couple of screens here. So one of the most powerful benefits of Discovery, as I mentioned to earlier, is being able to aggregate all the data you have from other systems, right? And this is huge. And sometimes when we talk to customers, they're like, well, we have SCCM or we have other tools. We don't really want to rediscover them all. But the point there being is, if you trust that source, we can honor that. All we would do is just connect it to your system and start pulling the assets into this single location where we can then put in rules for it to go into the self-service capability that I showed you. It's quite important. Same with mobile device management. We can connect it to all sorts of different sources. From a software license perspective, we can connect it to your MSDN accounts, Dell warranty, things like that. And a lot of tools have this capability. And I just wanted to show you that little piece. The assets themselves, you can see here, you can start really managing BYOD versus company issued devices. You have, just from a technical perspective, and I'm not going to say too much more here, the amount of inventory we capture is huge in comparison to other tools out there. So for example, workstations, when you actually look at the information, we can capture user information, most frequently logged in users, even the monitors that machines are connected to, down to the serial number of those monitors, right? So those sound bites were intentional, because anybody who lives in this space will be like, wow. And this tool's really designed for your IT folks. The business guys would never see this. Your service desk people wouldn't see this. They would just interact with the assets once they're in the service management platform, right? So let me show you what that looks like. right? So that tool that I just showed you will be sending all its information through to, let's go into hardware assets. And we'll just group by asset type real quick. You can see here all your usual suspects will be populated from your this becomes the single source of truth here. So let me just get a couple of assets. And the point being is one of the most common issues is being able to track where it is, be able to know if it still exists or not. And being able to quickly assign a user to an asset to verify what's going on is pretty powerful, right? So in this example here, earlier I was alluding to being able to see all different aspects of an asset. You'll be able to see your discovery information, versus assigned values. You'll also be able to see what software is installed on it. So if somebody logged an issue with this, you'll have a 360-degree view of the asset, and with every scan there'll be an audit history showing you what configuration changes occurred against that asset as well, right? Yeah, and stock management, being able to put in all the assets using barcode scanners into a storage facility, being able to track purchase orders, invoices, shipments. But again, this was just a brief overview of the different capabilities around asset management that we can help with. But step number one is discovering what you think you have, or verifying what you have, which is really this view, being able to very quickly roll out the discovery tool, get everybody involved in your organization, show them what you've discovered, and then take it from there based on the different maturity levels that we were talking about earlier. Okay, so just wrapping it all up before I check the queue for questions. Yeah, look, how do you get started? Give Chris a call. You've registered for this webinar, so we do have your contact details. And it's all about, discovery and inventory, starting off with your providers and consumers model, really starting to normalize what you think you have versus what your contracts say versus what you find at that point in time when you run a discovery. And then it all roads lead to a modern service desk. The service desk can only support your users if it's asset centric. So your users don't have to be asked and answer technical questions like model and asset tags and things like that. We proactively know what that user has, and we can provide guidance and help them quicker and ensure that they come back. And then, of course, look at all the life cycle management and finish it all off with being ready for an audit at a drop of a hat. Okay. So if you want to make a note of this, this was the very first webinar from Fusion5. Over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll be rolling out more unified IT webinars. So please just mark those dates. There'll be comms coming out, but then very next will be about bridging the gap between ITAM and security, July 10th. Ivanti is running the Unplugged events. I personally went to the Madrid interchange in March, and they're making the way down to our part of the world. So Sydney is the 6th of August, Melbourne is the 8th. Please do register for that when the comms come out. And last month, or earlier actually, this month, we've reignited the Ivanti user groups, hosted by both Fusion5 and Ivanti. Run in the east coast of Australia. You've got Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and you've got the dates there on the screen. I'll leave it there. I would like to thank you for your time. I'm going to check the queue now. Chris, if you want to just, wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. That was excellent. And just to, summarize, I guess the core messaging behind our webinar today, and that is that we understand from our customers, and we're currently partnering with over half a dozen of our customers on the unified IT journey. Certainly, there is an acknowledgement that without discovery and without an effective IT asset management solution in place that continuously and automatically updates itself when there's adds, moves, and changes in your business, it's very, very difficult to successfully embark on adjacent business initiatives, whether that be security, whether that be automation, onboarding and offboarding, without a reliable asset management solution in place, a single source of truth that you can rely on. Really, you are going to be significantly challenged rolling out these other business initiatives. So thanks so much, Ed, for your time this. Thank everyone else who was on the call. We do have a list of all those attendees and those who apologise for not being able to attend. So I'll get an email out over the next day or so, so you'll have at least my contact details. I'll be delighted to speak to you about your business and have an in-depth discussion with you about how we can help in collaboration with our partners Ivanti. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great day, and we honestly look forward to hearing from you soon, because we believe we can help. Thanks so much.